I allowed myself to be completely me as the experiment was going on. I was not dressed in a jacket. I was not uh, trying to be professorial. I was just a person on an adventure and finding the totality of what was happening continually surprising. And what was interesting was that actually the days started, so to speak, gently, and with each consecutive day, more surprises and more details would come up. It was almost as if there was some intelligence to this whole process, they were gently taking me along because I could only handle so much surprise per day. I was looking for flaws up until the very end, and after we were all done, I still could not, quote, believe what we had seen. But what I meant by transformative was that I was beginning to recognize that there was something that was going on that was much bigger and deeper than I had anticipated in my wildest dreams was even possible. The Kitt Peak day was a very special day because Christopher saw many details that were very precise. For example, he saw a solar telescope. He actually constructed something that related to a sun in a telescope. And by the way, how many solar telescopes are there anywhere? And here we were, it turned out when I actually made the phone call and discovered where we were going. We're going to Kitt Peak, which has the world's largest solar telescope. I was also struck by the fact that he got information that was somewhat symbolic. For example, so he saw information about his camera, but he knew from the context of the camera to be able to interpret that concrete image into a symbol, because that's part of what makes him the dream detective, is he knows how to take certain information and he knows how to figure out when is it literal and when is it symbolic. And so I watched him do that. So those details were very dramatic, and it was very excited to be driving up to the top of this mountain and realizing that he got all these details. It was right. But what I found even more amazing were the things that didn't make any sense. For example, he had this thing about this propeller and this airfield and planes and stuff, and I didn't know what he was talking about. What does that have to do with Kitt Peak Observatory? But driving back, we ended up passing this restaurant, and this restaurant turns out to have a little private airfield. And in front of this restaurant is this gigantic propeller. And so there again, I was seeing that although the site was the telescopes, he was getting additional information that we could independently verify. How many restaurants do you know of that have a gigantic propeller in front of them that are alongside an airport? Again, the constellation or the pattern for me was very telling. The Twin Tower experience was actually very disturbing for me because about 2/3 of the way through the experiment, Christopher relayed that he had a nightmare, and he used the term nightmare. And he told me, and he told a number of other people in the bar at the hotel, that in his dream there was this big city, and he saw these planes crashing into this tall building, and thousands of people were dying. Now, I could not imagine this. Remember, this is in early August. I said, Christopher, I said, do you have any sense about when this is going to happen? He said, no. I said, do you know exactly where it's going to happen? He said, no. And he asked me, he said, is this part of the experiment? I said, no. And so what I did was I dismissed it. I couldn't even imagine that this was a possibility. And I let it go. I didn't think about it for the rest of the time he was there. But when he went back to England, he continued to have dreams about this. And then in early September, he called me and he told me that these dreams were continuing. And of course, one thing led to another. And he ultimately, finally, a few days before, actually sent a CD of the 10-day in Arizona experiment to the, I think it was the American Embassy, trying to get their attention that something was imminent was happening. And then on the day of 9/11, of course, the impossible happened. And all of a sudden, I realized what Christopher must be living with. Imagine if you could be having dreams about something absolutely horrific happening and you knew that if you could just get the information to the right people, it might be prevented. And here you are, even flying from England to the southwest of the United States to trying to get a scientist to look at what you're doing with an open but careful mind. And still, you can't get the information communicated in a way that it might save lives.
After 9/11, I was contacted by people from American agencies. Now that would be quite natural. First of all, I'd written to the London embassy telling them that I had information about these terrorist incidents and sent them discs of the Arizona experiments. And I posted that letter to the London American embassy on the Sunday before 9/11. That letter would have found its way, in fact I know it did, through various departments. Of course those agencies are interested in people like me. They've been interested since day one, I would think.
Having experienced multidimensional realities since I was a child, and always wanting to understand how, not only how the universe is, but why the universe is as it is, I've researched consciousness and leading edge science and ancient wisdom for over half a century now. And my sense is, as Shakespeare said, there is more in heaven and earth, Horatio, than we have knowledge of. I do believe in precognition. I've had precognitive experiences myself. And what's now emerging is an understanding by science as to perhaps how precognition can work. And what it's recognising is that more fundamental than what we call space and time and matter and energy is information, that underlying and indeed pervading the world of the manifest, there is causative factors. So our world is co-created on many different levels of the intention of what Einstein would have called cosmic mind. Now that means that truly, in reality, we co-create the universe afresh in every moment. And before what we call the present fully crystallizes,